Let me just, again, tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a Bostonian, born and raised, okay? I was born at Boston City Hospital, it's now called Boston Medical Center. I grew up on Wambach Street. I don't know if you know where Wambach Street is, right up there, and then in Brinsley Street. I went to the David A. Ellis School. I went to the Henry L. Higginson Middle School, to Lewis Junior High School, and then on to Boston Tech. I've always had somewhat of an interest in math and science, and so Tech at the time was one of those schools that offered that kind of program. You know, at the time when you looked at some of the test schools around Boston, there was Boston Latin, there was Boston Tech. And because of what I had interest in, test seemed like a better fit for me, and that's exactly where I decided to go. And, you know, and I'm going to date myself here because it's important to put things into a time context as well. This is in the 1960s, okay? So this is 1964, 1967, right in that time frame at Boston Tech. And I'll never forget that I was really receiving some bad advice from the guidance counselor around college and all that. He said, well, you know, what you should probably do is apply to one of the junior colleges. And, you know, there's nothing wrong with that. But I said, wait a minute, this doesn't seem to be a fit, because I was doing pretty well in school, did well on the SATs. And there was a person that I went to who actually helped me out. And that's part of when we talk about networking, reaching out to people that can help you. And that was John O'Brien. Now you may recall there's a school over here called the John O'Brien School. Well, John O'Brien was my guidance counselor. I mean, I went to him at Boston Tech, and he helped me. You know, and said, George, don't listen to any of that. He said, look, you're in the top 5% of your class, you did very well on your SATs, you happen to like math and science, so pursue it. And I thought at the time I had some interest in, on the engineering side. I thought I would do something around aeronautical engineering. And interestingly enough, the Naval Academy had a program that was actually better than the Air Force Academy, which I found to be odd. But anyways, I received the runner-up nomination to go to the Naval Academy, which meant that there was somebody who actually received the nomination, but if he didn't go, then I could go. Well, that person decided to go, so I didn't go. So I went on to school not far from here, in Worcester, Massachusetts, to Clark University, and I majored in mathematics. Again, I like math and science, so I did that. And that was an interesting time during the 60s and 70s. There was a lot going on in the world, the Vietnam War, Black Power movement and all that, and I was involved with all of that, you know, because, you know, besides being, pursuing the educational part, you know, part of what this was about was trying to make life better for everybody, to change the world in a way that we could all benefit from that. And but from there, and again, I'll tell you, the person that you see in front of you is very different from the person I was back then. Not from a school standpoint, I did all that, but I was really involved with all these other outside activities because I thought it was very important to get to know as many people and to understand what was going on around the world, if you will, and around this country, so I just got myself involved. But at the time, I also had to work while I was in school, and I worked in the financial aid office. And the fellow who was the head of the financial aid said to me, George, when you finish college, what do you plan to do? What do you plan to do? And I said, well, I hadn't really given it a lot of thought. Now I'm in my junior year, I hadn't given it a lot of thought, you know. There was some thought about maybe going to law school, but I said, that's not really my personality. I don't really think I want to do that. He said, well, you know, you're really good with this finance stuff. Have you ever thought about going to business school? And I said to myself, well, you know, business school, and then I could espouse all that political rhetoric of the 70s, you know, and why would I want to do that? I could quote Mao Zedong and all that. The Red Book, I read it and all that. And I said, why would I want to do that, you know? And he said, well, you know, you got to realize one thing. You're talking about wanting to be about changing things for the better. And you also need people on the inside of these corporations to bring about change, as well as people on the outside, you know. And I gave that a little thought, and I did not right then and there, but a couple of days, about a week or so later, I went back to it and we talked about it. And so I said, well, you know what, I thought about that, but if I go to school, I want to go to business school in New York. And my reasoning there was, again, the political side of me was part of my decision making here. And I said, well, if I'm going to study business, I want to go to the last pure bastion of capitalism, and that's Wall Street. That's in New York City. So if I want to go, I want to go there because I want to understand what that's all about. And so that's what I did. I went to New York University and finished school there, and that was great. I ended up coming back here to Boston, and I started my career at State Street Corporation. And at the time, I was, State Street used to bring in 4 MBA students a year into what they call this fast-track training program. And you had 2 years to complete this program. If you completed it within 2 years, then you would be fast-tracked in the organization. If you didn't complete it in those 2 years, then you were out. Go find a job elsewhere. Well, I completed the program in that 2 years with some difficulty. And the difficulty came in not in terms of the work itself, but again, I was the first and only black person to go through this program, and the treatment was a little different because I did not have the benefit of the loan officers taking me out with them to the companies that I had to analyze. So all the work I had, because at the time they were somewhat concerned about how the marketplace receive a black person doing this, because there really weren't any or many doing that. But it took one guy that eventually, after I did this analysis, and this was maybe a year and a half into my stint as a credit analyst, who decided to take me out. I went and presented the analysis to him, thinking he was going to go out, and he said, no, let's go on and ask the question. And once he did that, that sort of opened the door for all the others to take me out. But I was determined myself, because that's the other thing, you know, as you young men develop your own thoughts about what you want to do in life, there will always be some bumps in the road, but don't let that deter you. You know, you got to just keep trying to move forward and push forward, and that's very, very important. And that's exactly what I did. So anyways, got through that program and did pretty well with State Street. And after 10 years, it was actually about 9 years at State Street, I decided I was kind of interested in doing something else. I had a really good run there. I went from being a trainee to a vice president within about 6.5 years, and a lot of exposure to traveling the country, doing lending, both Fortune 500 companies. At one point I did lending to high-tech companies, which I really enjoyed that because there's a lot of interesting and very different kinds of people that were in that field. But I decided, you know, while this was good to me and good for me, I learned a lot, I felt like I wanted to try something else. And it just so happened that there had been an election, a new mayor had been elected. His name was Ray Flynn. It was really interesting. It was really interesting because I lived in the South End at the time, and my wife and I were out there passing out pamphlets for Mel King. Because we were so proud of the fact that, you know, we had a black man that had made it to the finals. You know, right now we have 2 men that are in the finals, Connolly and Walsh. Well, out of a pool of, how many were there, about 12 or 14? Well, back then, you know, there were a number of candidates, and it boiled down to Mel King and Ray Flynn. And from that election, Ray Flynn won. I was, at the time, still at State Street, but I was doing some work with Dimmick Community Health Center. I felt to myself that I needed to give back some. I learned some things, and maybe I could help out getting involved with one of the community-based organizations. And so I was involved with Dimmick Community Health Center on their board. Once they came out of receivership, we hired Jackie Jenkins Scott, sort of developed Dimmick, and I chaired the finance committee for Dimmick at the time. And that was, and there was a fellow on this finance committee who said, you know, George, we need some people with your skill set to work on a transition book for this new mayor. We're going to try to analyze the city to see exactly what's going on and present him with this. And I said to myself, you know, well, I don't know. I guess I'm one person always complaining about the inefficiencies in government, so maybe this is a time for me to try to do something positive and constructive. So I went to my boss and said, look, I've been asked if I've joined this transition effort. I can do a lot of this work early in the morning, in the afternoon, or in the early evening. And he said, yeah, I think that's great. Go ahead and do it. So that didn't relieve all my other responsibilities. I still had to manage my portfolio. I still had to bring in new business and all that, which was fine. But I did that, and I worked on a piece in that transition book for them. Left that when it was over, came back to my job. Several months later, I get a call that this new mayor was looking to put in place a financial team, and my name had come up in several different circles, and they wanted to know, might I have some interest in this? And I ended up being interviewed, and I was awfully naive, you know, at the time, because I didn't realize that, you know, when you're being interviewed by a group of people in a conference room, business people, and et cetera, you know, I'm thinking it's all confidential, and it really isn't. And they say, well, gee, we'd like you to go over and meet with the mayor. I've never met with a mayor before, but I went over and met with him. We spent a couple of hours, and he said, well, George, you know, do you have any interest? I said, if I come into government, the position I'm really interested in is the treasurer position. And he said, I think, yeah. He said, well, I'd offer that to you. So I said, well, look, I'm on my way out of town on business. Give me some time to think about it, and when I get back, I can give you my answer. Well, I'm off on a business trip. At the end of the day, I'm in my hotel room. The phone rings. It's the vice chairman of State Street calling me and saying, George, the media is all over us. They're telling us that you might become the next treasurer of the city of Boston. And is that true? I said, oh my goodness. But I had to be honest because it was true. And I said, well, yeah. I said, you know, that's something I'm considering. And his whole tone changed at that point. And he said, what do you want us to do? You know, they're really interested because, you know, you'd be the first black treasurer of the city of Boston. And they want your resume, they want a picture of you. I said, oh, go ahead, give it to them. The next call was from my wife, same thing. You know, the media's all over us. Well, anyways, long story short, and fast forwarding, I ended up becoming the treasurer of the city of Boston. And I served as treasurer during the mayor's first term. And I was also, at the time, the collector of the taxes, too. Which was an interesting experience because at the time, and you look at the South End right now, and you see how it really has gentrified. Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, the South End back then was very different, and it was in the process of transitioning somewhat, but at a very, very slow pace. While I was in my capacity as collector of the taxes, the city auditor came to me one day and said, George, you know, there's this old black woman who owns about 4 or 5 of these brownstones on Columbus Avenue, but she's about to lose these properties. You know, there's some developers trying to take her properties, and because of the back taxes, can you do anything? So I said, yeah, I stopped the law department from moving forward with that, and we put in place a payment plan for her, and we did that, but she owed so much. Years worked with one of these developers because she was living in 2 rooms. They were all dilapidated, beat down. I said, what you really need to do is work with a developer. He can front the money, develop these properties, turn them into condos, and you could have a nice place to live and you could have, you know, money in the bank. And that's exactly what happened. So she went from living in 2 rooms that were dilapidated in one of these 4 or 5 buildings she owned into this nice, fully modern duplex unit. Plus, she had lots of money in the bank. So it worked out for her, and we're happy. But that's just to point out that, you know, even it's so interesting. The job I had as both treasurer and collector of the taxes, the interesting parts of the job wasn't the financial aspects of it, but it was the people aspects of it. Doing things that you really make a difference in people's lives. And I think that's what I enjoyed most about that experience. One experience, and by the way, you know, coming in this building, and as a young man, as a teenager, there used to be a building here before this building. It was 2414 Washington Street, and I used to clean this building. You know, on every Monday and Wednesday evening, I'd come in after, because there's offices in here. Even on Saturdays, I'd come in. You have to do the floor. So you know, when I'm coming back in here, it's bringing back old memories. You know, but that's part of what I did because I had to make some money. You know, because I didn't have any, and I needed some, and that's what I did. But just going back to my career at State Street, at the city. So from there, I stayed, and I told the mayor, no, one other experience on the city, then I'll move on. There was a movement at one point, there parts of Roxbury wanted to secede from the city of Austin. I don't know if you all recall that at all. I sort of led the, yeah, Mandela movement. You remember that?
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. And in my capacity as both treasurer and collector of taxes, I really did an analysis of that, and I started attending a lot of these community meetings and pointing out that all the reasons why you should do that. And because, if you set up a new city, then you have to have a city government. You have to have services, right? Public safety, fire, all the whole bit. You have to keep the streets clean, etc. Well, if you look at the city of Austin, you look at the tax base, then taxes are paid, the majority of taxes are really paid by all the downtown corporations. There's two rates. There's a residential rate and there's a corporate rate. But 80% of what's collected is actually because of the corporations, and that's what keeps the city going. So if you were to secede, then you have to set up your own government. You'd be taxing the people that least afford to be paying more taxes to make this work. And so finally, so through those meetings, the community sort of backed what we were saying about that and decided, yeah, it doesn't really make sense. Understood it in concept, and I thought it was great because it brought some attention to the attention that needed to be brought to this community, and for the city to pay more attention, and that's what it did. But anyways, moving forward, after serving as treasurer, I had an opportunity for his first term. All I did was work, and it was like. Seemed like it was 24/7 because that was just the nature of the job. You just had to, there's so many things going on across the city that, you had to work. And so I told the mayor that, look, I'm gonna, after your first term is over, I'm leaving. I'll stay through the end, if you decide to run for re-election, I'll stay until the end of that, but after that I'm leaving. And I had an opportunity to go to New York. I was recruited to go to New York to run a small bank in New York called Freedom National Bank of New York. And that was the bank that Jackie Robinson, who broke the color barrier in baseball, founded. And so it was located on 125th Street, a couple of doors down from the famed Apollo Theater. When I joined as president and CEO, Rachel Robinson, that was Jackie's widow, she joined the board, and it was a great community bank that was experiencing really difficult times. The difficulties came, and I know the young people would know this, but it was a time like the crisis we just went through with the mortgage crisis. Well, there was something called what was that called?
Savings and loan scandal?
The savings and loan scandal, yeah. S&L crisis. And where banks were being closed almost weekly, daily. And this bank had some, when I got there, on paper it was looking good, but when you go in and you kick the tires and see that everything isn't what it seems to be, and we had some real difficulty with the bank, and then the regulators decided to make some changes about what they would consider to be capital would not be considered to be capital anymore. And when that occurred, it really put this bank in a bind. It was about 2 years into my tenure there. And so Charlie Rango, who was on Ways and Means, and myself, we worked to try to raise capital for this bank because there had been so many problems with loans that had been made that should never been made, that we had to raise capital. We weren't successful with that because no one wanted to invest in banks. And I'm just pointing that out to you because in life, you find that you have some successes, but you have some failures. And in many ways, that was a failure for me. Okay, because and I felt badly about it because I had all these employees who were counting on me to turn this thing around and move it forward. But the tide was so strong, I couldn't raise the capital that we needed, and the bank had to be closed. And so that's what happened with that. In the process, I came back to Boston because our chairman at the time and CEO of State Street, from the time I left, and I was almost gone 10 years, he called me once a year and said, George, will you come back? And so I ended up coming back to take over the foundation and what we called community affairs at the time. It's called corporate citizenship now. And it was supposed to be a 2-year assignment. Come in, clean it up, straighten it out, get it back in shape. And then because you've always been in management on the line, we'll find something else for you to do. Well, 2 years later, he did come back to me and said, you did what I asked, and here are a couple of opportunities. And I said to him, I said, I'm not interested in any of that. And he said to me, well, why? I said, well, I'm really fascinated with the company that I returned to, because here was a company that had become global in scope. It had operations all over the world, but everything we were doing with respect to investing in our local communities in an organized fashion, we're only doing here in Boston. And I said to him, I said, what I'm really interested in is making sure wherever we have boots on the ground, wherever we have offices anywhere in the world, that we invest in those local communities the same way we're invested here. And he said, hey, look, if that's what you want to do, I love the idea, go ahead, it's yours. So personally, when you say you have a hard time reaching me, for the last 23 years, that's what I've been doing. And so I have committees in 38 locations around the world, so I'm just constantly going from Asia to, all around Asia to Europe and then back here to make sure that what we're doing it in a way that is making a difference in all those local communities. And so that's what I've been doing, that's what I've been up to all these years. But from that, you really do, I have learned a lot of things over this period of time. And some things I wanted to share with you guys, and that is that, you really do have to use your time effectively and efficiently. You have to really invest in yourselves. I use the phrase that knowledge is power, and you need to really gain as much knowledge as you can. The more knowledge you have, the more valuable you become. And that's so very, very important. So believe me, you have to really sort of take advantage of that. And I say as a black man also that we also need to have a sense of what our history as well. And because, we've come from slavery to where we are, through the civil rights movement to who we are today. And in many ways, we're standing on the shoulders of people that came before us. And so to me, what that means is we have an obligation to try to do well for ourselves, but also to reach back and be a part and to bring young people along. There's a saying that goes that a man without knowledge of himself is like a tree without roots. And so, I think it's very, very important that you know who you are, you know what your strengths are, and you play to your strengths. And then when you have weaknesses, you try to work to shore up those weaknesses. Because we all have strengths and we all have weaknesses, okay? The other thing I have found that has worked, at least for me, is to try to be somewhat planful, plan out and start thinking about, not what you're just doing now, but think about where you want to be in 3, 4, 5 years, or whatever time period. And but don't just think about it. Commit it to paper. It's really interesting when you take the time to really write things down. It causes you to focus in a way that you might not otherwise focus. And then when you write those things down, every so often, every year, take a look at that and see where are you relative to what you wrote down. And sometimes you may have to change. There's nothing wrong with altering or changing your plan. That's okay. That's fine. But the mere fact that you have written it down and you reevaluate where you are is very, very important. Because plans really do help to keep you focused and help you to make sure you're sort of you're going down the path that you're looking to go down. Because I do have all my favorite sayings, and there's another one that says, because if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. Okay? So I do think that's very, very important. The other thing, in my career has become very important is really developing relationships. And the more the better. You have to, no man is an island, as they say. So you really have to get to know and interact and develop your networks. You're being here today is part of your network, being a part of this program. And that's in meeting the people that you said, Wayne Budd has spoken here and others, that becomes part of your network. And you want to take full advantage of all these networks that you develop. And that's very, very important that you develop relationships as you proceed. And for me, the other thing I found that has worked well and is important to me, but is clearly just part of my upbringing, is that you always treat people the way you want to be treated. I don't care who they are, you know, and that can serve you well in many ways. So just sort of keep that in mind, that as you're networking and you're sort of develop, because you're really investing, whenever you network, you're really investing in yourself as well. You're meeting others, but you're investing in yourself. And that's so important. So I really encourage you to make sure that you do try to develop relationships, that you work with others, you collaborate, you be a part, you participate. You know, and because while I'm here speaking to you all here, what I'm most interested in is hearing from you, okay? Because that will be helpful to me. Because having a dialogue is one thing. I mean, a monologue is one thing, but a dialogue is where you really have the kind of interactions and you see what's going on and you can have that kind of exchange. Finally, I thought what I would do, and I don't know how much time I have, personally.
Yeah,
Much
you
I want?
got it, you good.
I'm good? Okay, I don't have 10 minutes, but
We can fill in 10 minutes. These guys have questions.
Good,
Shoot.
good. I enjoy that, okay. The other thing that I wanted to mention to you is, you know, when I think about all these lessons I feel I've learned is that you, and I've said some to you already, and that is that, you know, you really have to be true to yourself. You know, you really have to sort of understand and get to know who you are and what you're interested in. And it's different for every person, and that's okay. But you have to take the time to sort of figure out what's important to you and what you're trying to, what you want to accomplish with your life. And I have found for myself that that has really helped to serve me well. The other thing is that I've always felt it's very important sort of to give back, to reach back, and to help to really bring others along. And that to me is just personally rewarding, but I think it's something that we need to be about when we start talking about being about a community. I think with that, the last thing I'll say is, you know, time is your friend when you're young, because you have time to, you know, to have your ups and downs, and it'll make some mistakes, and you have time to recover. So while you're young, try to invest your time wisely, because if you do, it really will pay dividends to you later on in life. When you get a little older, it makes it a little more difficult. You know, time is not on your side the way it once was. So I always encourage young people to really use your time wisely. Let me stop there and just answer questions you might have.